You're listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome back. This month, I had the pleasure of talking to Daniel Saar from the Iowa Professional Regulation Office about the Iowa bar exam. To learn more about how the bar exam has been adapted during the time of COVID-19, how it will evolve in the coming years, and Dan's advice for the upcoming July bar exam, keep listening. Thank you for being with us today, Dan. Can you tell me a little bit about your role within the Iowa Professional Regulation Office?
Yeah, I'm the Assistant Director for Admissions. I've been in that role since about 2017, and prior to that, I was the Administrator for the Unauthorized Practice of Law Commission and the CLE, the Continuing Legal Ed Commission. But as far as my position now, I do administer the bar exam and do all things admissions related for the Office of Professional Regulation. So I see a lot of applications and do all that processing and get people admitted here to practice.
And today we are talking about the Iowa bar exam as it is coming up next month for some students here in Iowa. Can you give us an overview of the bar exam and what exactly it's testing for?
Sure. So we're testing for different skills and competencies and different knowledge areas that are deemed to be things that first-year lawyers need to know and to be competent to sort of hit the ground running. And it is a test of general competency, of minimum competency is basically what we call it. And just to make sure that the public can sort of expect that level of professionalism and competence for their attorneys when they go into their office once they're licensed. And what we do is we test over a few different areas, different subject matters, and then there is, which are contained in the MBE, which is the MultiState bar exam. It's a multiple choice component of the exam. It's the MEE, which is the MultiState essay exam, and that's covers specific different topics that kind of overlap with the MBE topics. And then there's the MultiState performance test, which is basically an opportunity for our applicants to get a case file, get all of the case law that they would need, get sometimes it's sample interviews with clients and that sort of stuff. And it's kind of supposed to be this is what you would expect as a first-year attorney, sort of an assignment that you would do for a judge, for a law firm that you would work at. And it sort of gives them an opportunity to be a lawyer, show off their lawyering skills in the exam format, and that's the MultiState performance test.
And how long does that test take? Is it all done within a day, or is it performed over multiple days?
Yeah, it's a 2-day exam. Generally, sometimes we have folks that if they need accommodations for whatever reason, it can extend longer. But for the most part, it's a 2-day exam. Generally, in a normal world, we test over 4 sessions, so it's 4 3-hour sessions, so 2 sessions a day. But with the online format that we've done, the remote format that we've done, we've switched that up a little bit. But
okay.
Generally, it's about 12 hours of testing over 2 days.
Okay, not for the faint of heart.
Right. Right.
And so nowadays, like you said, it's that 4 sessions over 2 days, but how has the bar exam evolved over the years?
Right. So most recently, we've had to adopt changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, last July, we had an in-person exam and basically just needed to make sure that everyone was safe and could still take the exam, and the integrity of the exam was all intact and all of that. So we had social distancing requirements, we had mask requirements and all of that sort of stuff. So last July, the bar exam looked very, very similar to what it normally looks like. For the February exam, this past February, and for this exam coming up next month, it's going to be remotely administered, and so it's the same subject matter. We just increased the number of testing sessions because people are taking the exam in an attorney's office at home, or at their schools, wherever they can find a place to sit in a room by themselves and take the exam. They're using their computers, and we have a proctoring system that we use with the webcam and microphone and all of that sort of stuff. So with that in mind, to give people more bathroom breaks and to ease the screen fatigue a little bit, we have more breaks throughout the day. So it's the same 12 hours of testing, but just broken up into more sessions over those 2 days.
Okay. And I know that you're, the expert in the Iowa bar exam, but do all states across the U.S. have different bar exams? Or say someone goes to law school in Iowa but wants to practice, somewhere in a different state down the road. How does that bar exam transfer, or do they have to retake it?
Right. So there are about 40 states right now that administer the uniform bar exam, the UBE, which is one of the acronyms I'll use and throw around a lot today. And what that means is they can take the test here, or let's say in Nebraska or one of the other 38 UBE jurisdictions, and transfer that score into whichever jurisdictions that they want to practice in. So what that would look like a lot of times is it's the exact same test administered under the, pretty much the standard conditions. Obviously, it'll vary a little bit. Taking the test in New York with thousands of people is a little different than taking it in Iowa with a few dozen or a couple hundred, depending on which exam is administered. But we do have, kind of our standard testing conditions. And once people obtain a score, they can transfer that score to, whichever jurisdictions they happen to achieve a passing score in. Now, there are different passing scores that have been established across the country. So, for example, ours is a 266, and just kind of depends state to state where you go, what that score is. They're all kind of within a pretty predictable range, and you'll see a lot of 270s sort of out west, and some states like Missouri and Minnesota have a 260, so a little bit of a lower passing score than Iowa. And that's just a function of, the boards of law examiners in those jurisdictions, and the courts have set that as the level that they want to have met for their incoming attorneys.
Great. Are there other options in Iowa for becoming an attorney apart from taking the bar exam?
Yeah, so there's basically two big ways to be fully admitted to practice law in Iowa. One would be either taking the exam here or transferring in from a UBE jurisdiction. So I would call that the examination route. Two separate applications, but one method of getting in here. You take the bar exam and use your score to be admitted. And then there's admission on motion, which if an attorney has been practicing for at least 5 years, our rule is you have to regularly engage in the practice of law for at least 5 of the last 7 years, and then you can be admitted here without having to take the exam. For all of those methods, we still do a character and fitness determination, do background checks and investigations, but that's sort of, you either take the exam or you practice long enough for the court and the board to have been comfortable with saying, yes, this is a competent attorney. They practiced for this long and have done a good job, haven't gotten in trouble and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Good to know.
Yeah.
And on average, what percentage of test takers pass the bar each year? I'm sure it fluctuates, but is there an average that you tend to see?
Yeah, so we have a February exam and we have a July exam. The July exam generally has a bit higher of a pass rate. It's been in the 80 to 83, 84% range the past few Julys. Our first time test taker pass rate, So people, they just got out of law school and it's their first crack at taking the exam. It's a little bit higher. It's closer to 86, 88% for July. For February, it's a bit lower, and that's just, it's kind of a different applicant pool. Usually it'll be, more people who have taken the exam multiple times or who have maybe failed previously. So that's been a bit below 50% sometimes, and sometimes we've gotten up to about 60%. But still, the first time pass rate for February exam takers is higher than the entire applicant pool. So people who generally are fresh out of law school and have a higher pass rate than folks who are repeat takers.
And you talked recently how you did the bar exam in person last July, and now we have been doing it remotely for these past 2 sessions. Have you seen any differences or changes in feedback from students who are taking that test?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of a give or take, with how we administer the exam. I think some people may prefer to test in person, have that designated space that they're going to go to. But I think on the flip side, you don't, if you're living in Illinois or, graduated from another state but want to move into Iowa, you don't necessarily have to do the travel into Iowa if you're doing the remote exam. I think, it's just sort of, with the remote exam, if you're comfortable with the technology, and we try to give people an opportunity to get comfortable with that by having them do mock exams and encouraging them to take a lot of time to really get used to the software. I think that's probably the biggest thing, just making sure that they have that level of comfort. But it's probably the case that nobody likes to actually take the bar exam. So if you, whichever version of it they took, they you may not like. But we try to whichever way we administer it, do it in a way that's as consistent and as reliable as we can make it. So that it's fair to the applicants and to the public. Absolutely.
And once passing the bar, what are other requirements attorney must fulfill in order to remain in practice?
So that's other areas that the Office of Professional Regulation sort of takes care of, and I mentioned a couple of commissions and boards that I had previously been the administrator of. But basically, you go to continuing legal ed courses. We have a requirement of 15 hours per year. And then we have an ethics requirement for attorneys. And that requirement actually changed this year to require attorneys to take diversity and wellness courses, specifically for some of their hours, and then an ethics course as well. So there is still an ethics requirement. We want to make sure that people are learning sort of and keeping up on the substance of the law, but also sort of those things that tie into the ethical implications of being an attorney. So, taking care of themselves is the wellness component, and, kind of recognizing and hopefully helping to expand the diversity of the profession. Has been
Absolutely. You talked a little bit earlier about how the bar exam has changed, moving from an in-person to a remote format. Moving on into the future when we are, post-COVID and having to make adaptations for the exam there, do you foresee any other changes to the bar exam in years to come?
Yeah, so this was before COVID was a thing, sort of system in the works or movement in the works, where the National Conference of Bar Examiners, the NCBE, which is the organization that puts together the test that we use, they did a 3-year study looking at what we could do to build a better bar exam, or to make sure that it's testing the areas that first year attorneys need to be competent in. So that was a 3-year study where they took a look at interviewing practitioners, interviewing new attorneys, anybody that sort of has any sort of interaction with new attorneys, was able to provide input. They did a lot of focus groups and things like that, and came up with some recommendations for what the exam of the future may look like. So that 3-year study concluded, and now they're kind of developing that test, and that, if anybody's interested in that, that's you can look at Next Gen Bar Exam or do a search for that. Mm-hmm. And the NCBE has a really great resource for updating a blog on sort of what the test may look like. And one of the big things about that, or there's a couple of things that they sort of have said that the exam is going to look like, and it's I believe going to be delivered on a computer, but it looks like we'll still be administering it in person. Okay. So we won't have paper materials that we're handing out and all that sort of stuff. But so kind of switching, and I think the court system in general has switched to electronic filing and all that. So a lot of that happens on computers anyway. And then they changed some of the skills and subject areas that people just sort of tweaked them a little bit and refined it. A lot of it's the same, but there is a little bit of change to what those areas will look like. And then the items, which I'm a nerd about it and excited to see what it looks like. Right. It's sort of a hybrid model of, I mentioned the MPTs, the multi-state performance test, and where you're given all of the materials. So you're given the case law, you're given facts and all that. And kind of the idea would be you're thrown all that information or given all that information, and you do different types of responses. So you can do multiple choice questions, you can do short answers, and you can do maybe something similar to what the MPT looks like. But those are in development now. So we're sort of in the bar admissions community eagerly awaiting. I'm not sure if anybody else really is. Probably the law students and schools are excited to see what that looks like, or anxious to see what that looks like. But there's going to be opportunities for input along the way, and it's again sort of an evolving process.
Very, very cool. And lastly, do you have any advice for law students preparing for the bar exam coming up here in July?
Yeah, so you ask very timely questions. I'm not sure if you really dug into it and searched those out or anything, but there was actually recently a study done with the New York Board of Law Examiners and an organization called Access Lex, which does a lot of good work within the legal community, and they looked at what made people successful on the first and or second time of taking the bar exam. And it's a lot of the stuff that I would normally have told people, like spend a lot of time studying, make studying your job, to the extent that you're able to do it. But they also sort of honed in and said, yeah, you can spend a lot of time studying, but if you're not doing it efficiently, so if you just have a book open and are hoping that the knowledge jumps into your head, maybe that won't be as effective. But I think there's also the idea that people maybe shouldn't jump wholeheartedly into a new studying method or new study system. If they go to these organizations that provide study materials, there's quite a few different companies that provide study materials for the exam, and I think applicants should kind of follow those programs, but also recognize, okay, this is what I did during law school that helped me be successful. So if I'm not catching the materials and I'm not learning what I feel like I need to be learning, then switch over to sort of a hybrid model or sort of customize it. And then I think also just sort of managing outside stresses as much as possible, and that may include letting your family know that, hey, I might be studying a lot. We may not be able to do, go on extended vacations without me having my book open and all that sort of stuff. So just get sort of that buy-in from family and friends and employers as much as possible to sort of be understanding that it's going to be a lot of studying, and you may be a bit of a phantom for the summer, but you'll be back after you pass the bar exam.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for all of your knowledge and expertise today.
Thanks.
You've been listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast hosted and produced by me, Marissa Gaal. If you would like more information about Iowa's courts, you can visit www.iowacourts.gov. You can also follow the Iowa Judicial Branch on Twitter and YouTube @Iowa Courts. This episode of In the Balance is now adjourned. Until next time.